In the middle of the most eventful week in this offseason's recent history, while the entire market was still processing the A.J. Brown trade, the Josh Sweat rumors, and the Max Crosby odds, the Philadelphia Eagles made the quietest move imaginable on Wednesday. It was not a blockbuster trade. It was not a contract extension. It was not even a free agent signing that is going to trend on anyone's social media feed. It was a re-signing. A player the Eagles cut at the start of this week was brought back 2 days later. And what that decision reveals about how Howie Roseman thinks about roster depth during the most intense roster-building period of the offseason is more interesting than the player's name suggests at first glance. What the career trajectory of this 23-year-old linebacker reveals about the Eagles' evaluation process, why the Baltimore Ravens were the ones who first bet on him with a real contract before Philadelphia, and what the current state of the Eagles' linebacker room says about why this kind of re-signing makes sense in the context of the biggest offseason this franchise has experienced in years, you are going to understand all of it right here. If you are a true Eagles fan, hit that like button and subscribe right now, because understanding how Roseman builds a championship roster means understanding exactly this kind of move that most fans overlook entirely. The week that included the A.J. Brown trade to the Patriots, the Elijah Mitchell arrival in the backfield, the Josh Sweat rumors out of Arizona, and the 6% Max Crosby odds also included, buried in the lines of the NFL transactions wire on Wednesday, the announcement that the Eagles signed a linebacker they themselves had cut just days earlier. That linebacker is Chandler Martin. Martin is 23 years old and came out of the University of Memphis without being drafted last year. Those two facts, 23 years old and undrafted, combined, form the profile of a player the NFL treats as a developmental project. Most teams in the league are full of that kind of signing at the back end of the 90-man roster during the offseason. What makes Martin's story different is what happened after the draft ended without any team using a pick on him. The Baltimore Ravens saw something in the linebacker out of Memphis that justified not just an undrafted free agent signing, but a 3-year, $3 million contract. That number goes well beyond the standard minimum deal that teams typically offer undrafted free agents they want to develop on the practice squad. $3 million over 3 years means the Ravens made a real bet on Martin, believing that his athletic profile and development potential within the system justified a financial commitment that goes beyond simply adding a body to training camp. But Baltimore went through the 2025 preseason and made the decision to release Martin before the regular season opened. That decision is not necessarily an indication of a lack of talent. The Ravens' preseason is contested in an environment of extremely high competition, with a roster full of high-level players that makes survival for an undrafted linebacker particularly difficult, even when the player shows genuine development. Martin was then added to the Ravens' practice squad, which is a signal that the organization still saw value in the linebacker, even without space for him on the active 53-man roster. The movement between the active roster and the practice squad repeated itself across the 2025 season with a regularity that any NFL scout recognizes as the pattern of a player the team wants to develop, but who is not yet ready to be deployed consistently during the regular season. In 3 games with the Baltimore Ravens across 2025, Martin recorded 5 tackles. Those are not numbers that are going to appear on any list of the league's best linebackers. But for a 23-year-old player in his first NFL season, 5 tackles in 3 game-day appearances as an undrafted rookie is exactly the kind of evidence that suggests there is something worth developing. And that evidence is exactly what prompted the Eagles to take notice. The Philadelphia franchise signed Martin in March of this offseason, bringing the linebacker in to compete for a spot on the 90-man roster, and eventually for the 53-man roster heading into Week 1. But then, earlier this week, the Eagles cut him. And 2 days later, they re-signed him. This pattern of cutting and re-signing a player within such a short window is not unheard of in the NFL offseason, but it is uncommon enough to merit analysis. What happened between the cut and the re-signing? Likely one of 2 things. The first possibility is that the Eagles released him with the intention of seeing whether any team would claim Martin off waivers, which would give the franchise useful information about how the rest of the league evaluates the linebacker. If no team claims a player, you can re-sign him at no additional cost, and with the confirmation that the market is not competing for him. The second possibility is a technical issue of contract timing or roster number management that was resolved in the 2 days between the cut and the re-signing. Regardless of the technical reason, the practical outcome is the same. Chandler Martin is back at the Jefferson Health Training Complex competing for a spot on a linebacker room that, despite having quality established pieces, has genuine depth questions that are going to become increasingly apparent as training camp approaches. Zach Bown is the cornerstone of the Eagles' linebacker room. The linebacker had one of the most impressive individual seasons that any defender wearing the green uniform has delivered in recent years, becoming one of the most surprising success stories of the 2024 season and solidifying his status as one of the most complete linebackers in the NFC. Bown is the kind of player that elite defenses are built around, capable of covering, defending the run, and pressuring the quarterback depending on what Vic Fangio's system asks of him in any given situation. Nakobe Dean is the second established name in the group, but the word that appears most frequently alongside Dean's name in any serious Eagles roster analysis is availability. The linebacker has undeniable talent, but has spent significant portions of recent seasons managing physical issues that limited his ability to be the consistent partner alongside Bown that the system needs. That uncertainty surrounding Dean is, by itself, the clearest explanation for why the Eagles continue adding linebackers to the 90-man roster, even at a moment when the franchise is focused on much larger matters. Ben Van Sumeren and other young defenders round out the group, but none of them have reached the point where any coach could say with confidence that they know exactly what they will get from those players in high-pressure situations during the regular season. And that is exactly the gap of certainty where players like Chandler Martin exist within a roster-building system like Roseman's. Martin is not being signed to be an Eagles starter in 2026. He is not being signed to definitively solve the linebacker depth problem. He is being signed to compete, to add a 23-year-old player with genuine developmental potential to a group that will go through the training camp and preseason funnel before the 53-man roster is finalized in August. That internal competition has real value. It raises the preparation level of every player in the group, forces more difficult and more informed decisions during the cuts, and ensures the franchise always has more options than it needs before reducing the roster to the final number. What Martin's story also confirms is something that any serious observer of Roseman's roster-building process already knows. The Eagles' football operations department never stops working, never stops searching for and evaluating available talent, and never leaves a 90-man roster spot empty for more than a few hours if there is a value option on the table. During the most eventful week of this entire offseason, while the market was focused on Browns and Rams and Patriots and Cardinals, the Eagles were also looking at the transactions wire and finding a 23-year-old linebacker that the Baltimore Ravens had bet $3 million on and who was now available. With Chandler Martin back on the roster after being cut and re-signed in less than a week, the Eagles' linebacker room heads into training camp with more depth than the market was acknowledging. Do you think Martin has a realistic chance of surviving the cuts and making the 53-man roster in August? And does this cut and re-sign move reveal more about Roseman's evaluation process than it appears to on the surface? Leave your opinion in the comments. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe to the channel. I'll be back later with the latest Eagles news.